I sent out a revised agenda, and I just wanted to check in with anybody if there are any revisions or comments, questions.
I thought the agenda was good. I saw that the chat's disabled, but so I can't like copy the link so that everyone's there. I can't see if everyone's in it.
Yeah, the chat's disabled. Equin,
I just
is it
enabled
possible?
it.
Oh, you just say, is it possible to, okay, she activated again. So the recommendation was introductions, followed by review task force purpose, followed by share desired outcomes, and then identifying areas of focus, identifying next steps, and then identifying roles and scheduling the next cohort meeting. It's an ambitious agenda, but we also have time at the August 1 assembly meeting, so we can also, finish the remaining tasks that we don't get to. But does that sound okay, Jeff? Thank you so much for drafting that first draft agenda. How did it look to you, these revisions?
I mean, the most important thing is we best use the time. So wherever folks want to go with using the time,
Okay.
that's great. We have 4 months. So we have ample opportunity to talk about these issues. I'm okay with even more pared down if you want to talk about a specific area. If we want to just focus on folks that are better understanding backgrounds, whatever that might be. The introductory kickoff meeting was very broad. So, I'll defer to folks here on how they feel, but I think the best use of the time, is for folks to better understand what the talent is here and interest here.
Okay, so I see some agreement. What about you, Nazneen?
Oh, you're on mute, Nazneen.
Sorry about that. I was trying to look at both agendas again. I am fine. Like I said, I think that I think introductions would be really good, just a little more in depth, because I know we talked some on last week, but I think it would be really good to get a little more perspective on where everybody is. And before going forward, I do think that looking at the different topics that we might want to cover, if we can get through that, that would be great, just because there are so many different ways we could go. And I think that, maybe looking at what the different interests are within each of us and our organizations and what we're representing might be a good idea.
Okay, good. So why don't we kick off with some introductions. I know some of us have met each other. Juan, we missed you the last meeting, but if we could each go around and then maybe just talk about our connections within Montgomery County, whether that's work or volunteer, community-based organizations that you might have, volunteered with, and then your personal interests in this task force and this work, networks that you might be in, and then strengths that you want to share, that you want to offer in terms of talents. So Juan, if you don't mind, if we could start with you.
Okay, well, thank you, Ariane. Juan Dang, a resident of Montgomery County since, well, let me just say when I got involved, actively involved. And that would be around 1997. Got involved with the Maryland Vietnamese Mutual Association as a board member. I'm still a board member. And, currently the treasurer. Have been volunteering for lots of different boards and organizations, but the one that I'm currently serving with is called the Committee for Montgomery. It's also an organization that advocates for Montgomery County issues at the state level with the General Assembly. The other board I mentioned is the Maryland Vietnamese Mutual Association. So, our mission is to advance the Vietnamese American community in the DC area. And then I also serve on the County Executives Advisory, the AAPI Advisory Group. So those are just some of my connections to Montgomery County. Professionally, I'm a budget supervisor with the federal government, and I don't know what else to say. What else do you need me to? What am I supposed to? Is there some things that we have? I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, currently.
I guess, so are there issues that you think that you'd like, that you think the task force should focus on, or that you'd like for us to focus on?
I think regarding anti-hate, I think I know a lot of the hate incidents. I think a lot of them happen in the schools. Kids, think they can it's part of it is not understanding what they do is hurtful, and kids tend to be a little more, I don't know, less aware of the issue. So that's something that I would be interested in exploring a little more, but I'm definitely open to whatever the group thinks. And I'm happy, I'm very happy to be serving on this task force with all of you. I'm looking forward to meeting some folks that I haven't met before, but I do know Nazneen and Ariane. So,
Juan, did you mention the Vietnamese American Association?
yeah. We've changed our name, so we're now the Maryland Vietnamese Mutual Association, also known as MVMA. So, because there's another organization with a similar name. We used to be called the Association of Vietnamese Americans, and folks got us confused all the time. So now we reverted back to our old name, which is MVMA. Yep. No, that's the one I've served on the board since I want to say 1997. So it's been a while.
Okay, great. Do you want to popcorn it to someone?
Yeah, well, I will hand it to next person I see is May Powers.
Hi all. So I've been a resident of Montgomery County since 2009. I worked at Casa de Maryland, now Casa, Women Thrive Worldwide, and now Miriam's Kitchen. So Casa focused on immigrant rights, Women Thrive Worldwide focused on women and girls' rights worldwide, and Miriam's Kitchen serves people experiencing homelessness. But the thread of all of that is just working with people who are often treated as less than or outsiders and trying to bring them into the fold and included in decision-making and things like that. More personally, I'm active in my neighborhood association. I have 2 young kids in elementary school. I have a rising sixth grader and a rising first grader. So hearing that most of the incidents in schools was really an eye-opener and concerning. Because I remember being the only Asian or one of 2 or 3 Asians in school growing up. I remember walking home from school and having other students throw rocks at me as I walked home from school. So I definitely hope that that is not something my children will ever experience. And so I'm definitely interested in the schools aspect. And there was mention of a report, I thought, in the kickoff meeting about incidents specifically in schools, because I was trying to figure out, is this mostly vandalism? Like, what does it look like? Like, is schools are just a target because they're there and easy access to, for graffiti, or what type of incidents are we talking about here? And I think besides schools, I saw one of the other things was like community solidarity, but I'm also just interested of like cross solidarity among the other groups. And I feel like that to me was like something that wasn't really discussed. So those are my 2 kind of like interested areas. And I'll popcorn it over to Jeff, who's on my screen.
There you go. Thanks so much, May. So I haven't been a resident very long. It's been about a year in the Woodside Muse area. Prior to that was in DC, recently serving as a commissioner for the mayor. on Asian American affairs. In most of my, at least public policy life, it's largely been in the service of members of Congress, and most recently the governor of California for 5 years, working on a portfolio of areas ranging from transportation and infrastructure to healthcare issues to immigration. And I think one of the challenges that at least I found being in these roles is sometimes you don't necessarily get to the ground nearly as much. And in the life after, it's been much closer. And I know many folks on here have had, I mean, maybe what you highlighted, I think many of us have experienced, but at least sort of, let's say, pandemic on, I'd say it's been a little more maybe brazen, might be the phrase, I guess. Brazen might be the word. And I think this year alone, at least, and I'm sure if you were to survey friends and loved ones, I think it's sort of, there's regular events. And I think to the questions raised in terms of, is it an education issue? Is it a access issue? Is it an equity issue? It's certainly an area where, at least in public places, it's happening a heck of a lot more. I just think on the metro, if you're riding on the metro, I think there will be some experiences. I think these experiences for me personally, I mean, probably 3 times in the last month and a half, something very uncomfortable has happened. And the bad part is you'll see folks not do anything or say anything. So I'm deeply interested actually in the elements of training and education, bystander training particularly, which I know many organizations have tried to emphasize, but really looking at it more comprehensively. And that can be in various institutions and organizations, whether that's in government or it's private employers in the county, nonprofit entities that obviously are partnering, that's through grants, whatever that might be. I know there's a footprint for it, but I think what's for sure is when you have good people faced with bad situations, you want to give them the tools to help, help support a good person in a bad moment. And I think awkwardly, the general public haven't had those opportunities to be informed on what their options are. And I think that's something I certainly think about. And I think broadly speaking, if you're talking about public safety or mental health issues, I mean, these are things that certainly need to be discussed. I think very much the case, May, I think your point on sort of the solidarity piece across communities, I think that is just absolutely vital, something that we need to really deepen. I think there's more similarities than differences. I don't necessarily want us to go down the road of the Olympics of oppression, but certainly just to be able to have significant degrees of empathy. And my hope is being able to weave substantive recommendations for council to enact in 2024. So that's a few of the areas that I'd love to see us work in. In my personal capacity, I advise political figures and policymakers on areas of budget or policy, state levels, county levels, city levels across the country. So this is an area I'm looking to certainly deepen as well. So looking forward to working with all of you and have loved to see all your great experiences and backgrounds. So Nazneen, I'll throw it over to you.
Thank you. So I'm Nazneen Saifi. I've been a resident of Silver Spring since I moved back down here, which was 2015. I think that's right. Yeah, 2015. Oh my goodness. I am the executive director of a small nonprofit called the Asian Pacific American Legal Resource Center. We provide legal services to primarily the Asian Pacific Islander population in metropolitan DC, mostly in the areas of immigration. And we work with domestic violence victims doing protective orders. And so, we work a lot with the low income, mostly with the low income community. We do have some specialized programs, and one of them we started a couple years ago. We got funding to start a program, and our Stop Anti-Asian Hate campaign. Unfortunately, it took a while to hire. Pandemic was not good to us in hiring, but we finally hired someone. But part of the reason that we started it and we received funding was because what was going on under the former administration with the rise in anti-Asian hate, what happened in Atlanta. And so what we were tasked with was providing education, looking to see whether or not there were civil legal issues that were needed, that someone needed assistance with. Although it didn't happen in Maryland, we had a family in DC that was that we helped with the U visa because they were victims of a really horrific hate crime. They were, it was a gentleman and his elderly parents who were literally yelled at and knocked down in the street. It was something that was really jarring to us. We've had interns who have been, accosted and told to go back to where they come from. All of our interns are of Asian descent. All of our staff is of Asian descent. And so it's something that's really very important to us to really make sure that people are educated on what their rights are and what they can do in order to make sure that these incidents are at the forefront, because a lot of times people do not want to. They tell us that it happens, or they'll tell somebody else, but they won't refer to the police. So I think that one of the issues that is at the forefront of what we do and what I think is important is just education, because we see that there are so many people that they know something's not right, but they don't want to report it. And I think that one of the things that we're trying to stress is the importance of reporting and why it is so important, why and how it can assist them and help them and the community at large. So since January, we've had someone on staff to just focus on our Stop Anti-Asian Hate campaign. She's been doing a lot of outreach, a lot of education work. One of the challenges we have is getting the community to come out to the events. We had an event in Montgomery County. We did a panel discussion with the state attorney's office and with Montgomery County State Attorney's Office and with the police department. And we had we did not have a really large turnout. And even, we've contacted a lot of the organizations, API organizations in Montgomery County. And, we're told, well, we really want to focus on this. And this is, sometimes it's public benefits or it's housing. And it's like, okay, but this is an important issue, but they're like, well, we don't want to talk about that. And, it's understanding why, and it's understanding why people don't want to come forward. So one of the issues I think is important for me is the education piece of it. We work with AA Lead, Asian American Lead, which is a organization that works with youth in Montgomery County. And we've done some Know Your Rights for them. And those have been, I think those students have been really forthcoming on what's going on with them, but even they don't want to have to report sometimes. The other issue that I think is in the forefront is what Jeff and May were talking about is the across the board, like talking to the other task force or other people and working together to really stop the rise in hate bias crimes that we're seeing. On a personal level, I've been a legal service attorney for so long, and I think I spend too much time at work. But I also have a large family that lives in Montgomery County, a lot of them, and I'm really concerned about how, some of them are in school, some of them are elderly, and how they're, being perceived and how they're being treated. And I want to make sure that, these are issues that are dealt with so that, going forward, we're hopefully, stemming the rise in these crimes. And Ariana, I'm going to toss it over to you now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thanks all for sharing. I've lived in Montgomery County since 1995. So it's been a while. I worked on national level till 2006. And then I became more active on the local level when I was raising a family. So among the different community organizations that I've volunteered with is serving as a board member of McHale, the Montgomery Coalition for Adult English Literacy. See as a immigrant backbone. CRICMIC also. I see we have a guest here, Karen Lynn, who is also on the board of CRICMIC, OCADC, MoCo Women, and the Parent Advisory Council to MCPS for Asian American Parents called APASAG, Asian Pacific American Student Achievement Action Group. And then in 2016, when there was a spike in hate incidents and hate crimes across the country, the CUA, which is the Communities United Against Hate, and Juan was a member of that organization as well, formed, and that was a coalition of several community-based organizations that were very diverse, not necessarily Asian American. And now they really focus on grant making to high school youth to do diversity projects. And then in addition, I've been involved in politics, so political campaigns, PACs, and then I'm a member of Leadership Montgomery. But here in my capacity, I'm serving as the founder of MOCOPON, which is the Montgomery County Progressive Asian American Network. And we've been in existence for about 2 years. And our goal is to use strategic communications to elevate the voices of Asian Americans in the county. There are many community organizations. We've done sort of this landscape overview, but many of them are still clustered in cultural heritage, language, school, categories. So Nazneen's, group is one of the few that is service provider, but in terms of active civic engagement, there really hasn't been many. So we want the public to know that our community is very diverse, as well as their views, and that there's a myriad of issues and a long history in United States. So we've been working toward, equity and inclusion and trying to support improved public understanding of APIs and representation. So we've done training MCPS in terms of professional development. We've been liaising with the students, particularly the Asian American Progressive Student Union during the height of COVID, when they had concerns about returning to school. And there was a listening session with the administration officials at MCPS, but the county council members also attended that as well. And we've had like film discussion events with different organizations, including Silver Spring on API history, which was it was well attended, and we were able to reach some new community members there. We do want to work in solidarity, so we're a member of the Black and Brown Coalition advancing educational equity, and we also stand up for immigrant rights. In terms of anti-hate crime work, we've done a lot of community education, forums with CUA, with the state attorney general, and across the county, state, local agencies, senior centers, faith institutions, and so forth. So we kind of are able to address both improving understanding of APIs and also talking about hate crimes. In terms of the networks in the county, what would I offer connections to different Asian American community organizations, also nonprofits, because I used to be a nonprofit consultant, political groups, and the immigrant community, especially mainland Chinese immigrant community, with whom I tried to understand more because there were emerging news on different controversial issues that were happening in Maryland, and trying to sort of bridge an understanding of inclusivity, with these emerging communities. In particular, I have an interest in building a community infrastructure for the Asian American community, because I think to achieve resilience, we need to have connection. So any kind of funding support, coordination, that's sort of routinized to help lift all these organizations, especially those that serve less populated groups who might be flying sort of under radar, so that they have the information, they're able to access, government programs and services, and, that the public at large is aware that they have a presence in the county. I've also worked for a long time on the national level in response to hate crimes on many different areas, but I have always said that hate crimes is a ground game, meaning that local community-based organizations are the organizations that lead in terms of whether that's, response and recovery, whether that's, intervention strategies, whether that's solidarity building, whether it's policy making, right? So I'm very excited to be working with, all of you who have these close ties in community to figure out how we can address this panoply of of issues that are very complicated. It's not going to be one bill to solve everything. You can lean on me for subject matter expertise in terms of hate crimes skills, community organizing, advocacy, community education and writing. And then the other thing that I offer is just pulling down some examples from around the country of what other community-based organizations have done and what national organizations have tried to do in terms of, in my former job, tried to build a national network of local community-based organization networks to be hubs and in order to, work together and resolve issues in the short term and long term. So that is my introduction. And at this point, I just want to also acknowledge and thank some other folks in the room. We have some, council and possibly county executive staff too. So Selena, Mindy Singleton and Equin Wen and Carmen Jenkins. And we have a guest too, who is Karen Lynn, who's already offering to observe and possibly assist. So appreciate all of you for being here. If it's okay, can we move to the next agenda item, which is to review our task force purpose? Okay, great. So we sat in the inaugural meeting and we heard that our task is to identify policies that promote safety and combat, racism, and the extreme manifestation of that is hate crimes. And then just checking with council staff, the reason why that we're broken up into different cohorts is because there is an interest for us to discuss API community specific issues, challenges, and solutions. I understand that the rubric that you heard mentioned by one of the other task force members that was requested and that is available, but not approved. So that is forthcoming, just to let you know. But in an interim, know that if we want to come up with short-term, medium-term, long-term solutions, that's all welcome. It can be, our recommendations can be, broad and comprehensive, or we can decide as a team that we want to, be more select and specific. So that's something to kind of address. And then the other thing that I think would be good to address is whether we want to focus on, more reactive work or prevention work or both. So that is the purpose. I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions about needing clarity around the purpose of our mandate here.
Hey, Ariane, can you repeat what was not approved? You said.
Oh, it was there was one of the task force members who requested like a guideline on, a framework through which we can create these recommendations, because it seemed like the mandate was very open-ended, right? And so the staff has prepared something, but it's just pending final approval by the council president.
Oh, I see. Do we want to hear from the staff?
Yeah, Selena, did you have anything to add to what I just said about the mandate itself?
What I was trying to do just now is find the questions. I think that those were approved as we were coming on, and they are just 3 questions, and I will just pop them in the chat. And they were just to help folks get started. So let me just try to find those, and I'll just put them in the chat while you all are talking.
Thank you, Selena. We're really looking forward to hearing more about your experiences as well, because you're a trove of information, we can tell. So in the chat, you have popped in some information, and it talks about how we're broken up into different cohorts and the definitions of bias incidents. And then the questions we see, there's one, and that's what types of hate crimes, hate incidents, or bias have been directed at people represented by your cohort. And then it kind of cuts off. Was there a second question?
Yeah, I can see it all. Can you all not see the whole thing? I'm getting some nods and some.
Yeah, if you scroll down, so the next question was what can be done to eliminate hate crimes, hate incidents, and bias from our community? How can the community increase awareness and understanding about these crimes and incidents, and how, where? Educational institutions, workplace, nonprofits, businesses. What kind of resources are necessary to improve safety and security? And the last thing you have is additional research on hate and extremism and hate crimes legislation and FY23 nonprofit security grants may be found in the attached documents.
So that will be sent when we send out the email. There's some more resources and some more guidelines.
Okay. If it's possible to also email that to us, since it's still cut off for some of us,
Yeah.
that'd be great. Thank you.
Or-
If I could just generate a little bit of conversation, what are y'all's first impressions in terms of the scope of the issues that we're going to cover? We got a sense by our introductions, but in terms of, short-term, medium-term, long-term horizons, would you all like to narrow it, or would you like to entertain strategies that sort of implicate everything along that time horizon?
I can just speak real quick on my just initial impression is that it is definitely a big scope, and 4 months sounds like a lot, but it will be here very soon. So I personally would prefer to scale down the scope, so that we can focus and get accomplish one of these objectives. But I'm certainly open to whatever ideas are out there.
Thank you, Juan. And when you say scope, do you mean in terms of, say, we focus on schools instead of small businesses, or are you saying we focus on how to give aid to impacted parties as opposed to trying to address like social determinants of community health?
Yeah, I want to say maybe we want to pick like maybe the top 3, something like that, as opposed to the whole list of things that we can put our efforts on. But realistically, I think we don't have a lot of time, and probably just want to prioritize on a few objectives, whatever they may be. I think schools, I think I heard bystander training is another important thing, and working with other groups.
And I was wondering, did you guys get a chance to like look through this report that they shared at the kickoff meeting? And flip through it? Because I think that there was a couple of things in there that stood out to me. Was just that hey, the places where hate crimes increased were in the 2nd and 4th district. It was in a certain age group, right? It said the first time in the elderly usually was the highest target, but this time it actually decreased, but now it's under 18. So to me, it's like there's a lot of data that's kind of saying like, hey, we're having an increasing problem in our youth and in our schools and in certain districts. So I know I've already said that I'm interested in schools, but I'm also trying to understand a little bit more. I thought I heard some comments of like, hey, MCPS is different, and what policy recommendations can we actually put forward that will be able to be taken? I don't really understand like if there's a line that shall not be crossed or something like that. So I'm just trying to understand like if we make any recommendations around schools, like how impactful they can be, how much they would be heard, I guess.
Just to answer your question, the MCPS is under the Montgomery County Board of Education. So they have a different governance, but the county council does fund does provide the funds, approve the funds for MCPS, to the tune of something like, I want to say about $3 billion a year or something like that. So, I mean, the council can't force the Board of Education to do anything, but I think, it's certainly a recommendation, can be provided, and it's up to them to adopt it or find their own solutions.
Yeah, I will say that, so I don't know a lot about MCPS, but I do know I'm also on the Asian Pacific American Advisory Group for the county executive. And I know that we've been trying to get MCPS to recognize like Lunar New Year and Diwali and Eid for the different Asian communities that we work with. And one of the things has been that, the county council and the county executive can't sort of like say, well, you need to recognize these holidays, it really is up to the Board of Education. So it's been a challenge when sort of advocating for these, because they really, they don't have to recognize what they don't, they don't want to, is sort of the gist that I get. And I don't have kids in school or anything like that. So, for me, it's like, oh, wait a minute. What do you mean that, they don't have to do this? If the county executive and the county council say, we want these to be recognized holidays. But that's sort of my low knowledge of it. But I know it's been a challenge for us when we've been trying to implement things, or like even get them to recognize or to take our recommendations.
Yeah, and one of the things I will say is that the county does respect MCPS's Montgomery County Board of Education's independence or governance, and also though the Board of Education has public meeting forums, and that folks can come, anybody can come and make recommendations in a public forum. We're not precluded, to just stick on county issues. We can, like, as for example, the APA county executives, APA advisory group, we decided, okay, we're just going to attend the Board of Education committees or whatever that organizes the calendar for the following year. I think a couple our co-chairs, they testified, and it was effective. I mean, they were able to, I think, schedule at least professional days so that the students can have the Lunar New Year off, and also the Diwali, things like that. So I mean, it's it's somewhat effective. They also listen to ordinary citizens as ourselves, so we don't necessarily have to go and make recommendations as county's task force. We can group together as our individuals who care about the issues.
One comment I wanted to make very quickly, May, you reference the law enforcement report, and it's a very good practice to really bring in the data and make any recommendations based on the evidence. Unfortunately, the data reporting on hate crimes is very inadequate across the country. So I'm not sure how much we can rely on the data. I think our jurisdiction is more diligent than other jurisdictions in terms of trying to collect that. But anecdotally, we also hear of incidents happening in a community. But that's not to say that we can't elect to focus on schools, and we can, and there's a lot that can be addressed even within schools. But I just wanted to throw that out there in case that made a difference. So I'm just hearing some interest. I heard a lot of interest in youth, which speaks to schools. And then Jeff, I wanted to turn to you because you had talked about, bystander training. And so that would be more inclusive of community members. Is that how you were seeing that perhaps?
I think certainly from a perspective, well, I think it's two things. One is being able to deepen civic organizational relationships and making sure that, this is not a scope that's narrow, right? The idea is that I suspect a number of the cohorts are also having a discussion about things that happen and people not really knowing what to do in these circumstances. So this is a broader education piece, but I think if you're talking about, whether you're talking about youth, whether you're talking about other areas, it's still going to require, at least in my mind, a deep investment in terms of civic education and a very clear how to. And I know there are organizations out there that are doing that, but it seems like in the county specifically, even if there is this service, it's certainly not getting to those places because it's certainly happening in public spaces in a way that is not going down. I think to the point you made on hate crime, I think we're fully aware, especially in this community, there's got to be significant underreporting, either for English language proficiency reasons, culture issues, immigration emphasis, whatever the case might be. There's clearly this disconnect. So anything that can bridge that, I think, to the broader scope of what we were just discussing, I would love for us to think about things a little more narrowly, only because I think from there you can kind of branch out accordingly. I mean, to the point in talking about youth education, sure, absolutely. If that's a place where people really want to dig in, let's do that. That in itself is 4 months, right? One of the big takeaways I had from hearing your backgrounds and experiences is that many of you probably don't sleep very much. Is what I've concluded. So anything we can do to I think have something very tangible that we can come out of this. And then again, I suspect many of our counterparts are also grappling with some of these issues. And I suspect the Mind Meld will reveal some trends that I think we can coalesce around. In this case, I think I'd rather focus on deep in quality rather than approach where we're hitting a lot of things. I think boiling the ocean here will be very, very difficult. And also thinking about from a council perspective, right? There's only so much programmatic budget grant support. I think we need to be really tailored on how we prioritize and stack rank accordingly. So that's just something I wanted to also emphasize as well as we think about this. Again, it's essentially 16 weeks, and that's not including Thanksgiving. So it'll go by very fast.
Yeah, and I do think that data is something that we really need to look at, and I think that not looking just at MCP at the police department and what information they have, but looking at what other outside organizations, like Stop API Hate. I think their numbers are a lot more realistic of what they've been seeing and what incidents that have been reported to them. On hate crimes. And I don't know if it's going to be, I don't know if it boils down to like certain areas, but I do think that maybe looking outside, because even the FBI, like we did a panel discussion with the FBI, and what they were saying was that, the data we have is only if the different states report it to us. And it's not mandatory. So, the data they have is very skewed because again, it doesn't report everything, and it's not mandatory reporting. But I do think that, this community in particular may not report to a police officer or police department, but they will pick up the phone and call one of the hotlines and say, I've been a victim of this hate bias incident. And so maybe looking at, when we're thinking about data and what would really benefit this community, this county, knowing is looking at that broader data that's not coming from the county itself or the state itself, but outside organizations that are collecting this as well.
Okay, I think we made a lot of good ground. Thank you all for the comments. And I've heard sort of 3 large bucket areas, and I'm just going to go through them. And then maybe we can just identify quickly different components so that you can sleep on it before our next meeting. And what I might want to recommend to you all is that we think about and discuss what different areas within the 3 buckets that we want to kind of narrow and deepen in a little bit more. So the 3 areas are schools, community, and solidarity. And I know that sounds really broad, but in terms of the schools, that's where the majority of the youth are. So think about, what sort of programs or activities that you might want to look at a little bit more closely, whether that's anti-school bullying certifications, it could be school climate, it could be diversity hiring, it could be professional development, it could be addressing the anti-critical race theory campaign, it could be trying to implement more ethnic studies. It could be funding, so that the schools can foster more sort of cross solidarity projects or conflict resolution, that kind of thing. And in the community, what I heard is bringing people together. So that also suggests some sort of infrastructure, which would lend itself to that and deepening relationships, as well as education to the community on, what might constitute a hate incident or hate crime, what to do about it, letting people know of like bystander trainings, and then also know where to report for assistance, where that's social services, whether that's going to law enforcement. And then on the solidarity piece, I heard, and tell me if I heard this correctly, Nazneen, it's about checking in with the other task forces also, and just doing more sharing there. Or did you also mean out in the community among different community organizations working with different communities?
I think for the purpose of this task force, it's checking in with the other task force. I think on a broader level, once the recommendations come out, I think it's going into the communities. That makes sense. If that makes sense.
Going out into the communities. Okay. Out to the communities. So is that sort of helpful to look at it in terms of those large 3 buckets? And maybe we can, before the next meeting, sort of think a little bit more deeply about, where do we want to concentrate our efforts, because there is some due diligence that we could probably do in terms of gathering information and talking to different stakeholders. And then that would help inform us, what sort of recommendations we want to put on the table. What do you all think about that approach, or do you have another one? Totally open.
Yeah, I'm fine with that approach. I think it's having seen it as three buckets helps narrow it down a little bit, so that it doesn't seem overwhelming.
And sorry, in terms of next steps, are you saying like, hey, I feel like this is kind of jumping to like maybe agenda 5, right? It's like, are we gathering information? Are we thinking about people we want to consult with? Are we thinking about, do we want to have listening sessions on these topics? Or like, it sounded like there was a little bit of homework, but I wasn't clear about like what we're asking, what we want to come forward with in the next meeting.
I was sort of thinking the same thing, like, where are we going, what are we looking at next steps? Are we looking at, who do we want to get involved or talk to? Or do we really just want to have the next meeting be, okay, this is what we think we want to move forward with. And these are, and, sort of even doing a spreadsheet or, I'm going to get this wrong, but like my staff is doing Jamboards where you can put up ideas and things. And I'm like, sorry, I'm not very good at this. They've created it. I just have to be a part of it. But it's something like that, where if we're like, okay, these are the buckets that we're looking at. What are some of the things that we want to do within them? And so even before the next meeting, it's something where we can just put in ideas and then organize them at maybe the next meeting or something. I don't know if that's helpful.
It is, and I had a Jamboard ready in case you all wanted to use it. So what I could do is share the link, and then there could be 3 whiteboards, right, for the 3 buckets. And then you could take a Post-it and just brainstorm, all different kinds of ideas. And then we can maybe take a look at it at the next meeting and see if there are, many duplications, which would, suggest that there's interest in those areas. Like I said, with the schools, it's schools alone are working with youth. There's a lot of different areas, that we can get into. And I think it's just a matter of where your interests, where your energies, leading you to.
I did have kind of a general question about the task force itself.
Mhm.
I saw that, in the chat, you said there were five community members assigned to this cohort.
Yes.
That sounds to me that it's very few. I know that the Asian, the AAPI, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander community, is a very diverse community, and I was just kind of surprised that it was such a small group. I was actually expecting a bigger group.
I will say I got the sense that there were significant cross-cuttings in other, whether that's for interfaith reasons, or maybe other identifications. I mean, you're right. I mean, if it's 5 here, it's pretty small, but it's also 5 versus 50. So I understand it's always this balancing act of how far the accordion comes in and out. And again, I think it gets back to the sort of expedience of getting to the place where, hey, this is the 1-2 things that we think we can move on. And I don't see this as this is not an end all be all. This is a start of I think a pretty significant process, and significant processes will be very substantive, but also very, very heavy to move. So, but I fully expect that part of this role will also be in many of our relationships and communities. I'm sure you all have already reached out to community members you really value and trust, and can give honest feedback. And I think that's, to what Ariane had talked about earlier, that's part of the jam session is also, I think as we sort of dreamscape what this could be, I figure by August 1, if all of us have taken that time to have some discussions and really sit down and listen on what we might want to work on, I think we will get to a place of shared commonality. So, but to your point, as we have discussions with other cohorts, I suspect there will be other lenses that will overlap with us, including in some of the interfaith, especially. I think, at least as I read the room, I think there were, even if there's 5 of us here, there's probably more of us in the entire task force. That's as I read.
Yeah, I also noticed that, Juan, and I always assumed, and this was also a suggestion in the materials, that we might want to hold community listening sessions. That's a possibility. Another is to, depending on where we land in terms of what we want to focus on, bring in community representatives or other stakeholders, who can come to this meeting, and inform us. So I think that, we have, the sky's the limit in terms of what information we take in, and make sure that their voices and perspectives are heard. But I just want to make sure that we are somewhat clear about the direction moving forward. I'll send out a link to a Jamboard. There'll be 3 whiteboards, and then you'll just brainstorm under those 3 large, sort of buckets. And of course, by email, we can also communicate with each other just to clarify even further what they might be. And then I think the next step might be, what are resources available in those areas and what are the gaps? And then that will help us determine who to consult, what information to gather, and then we'll move forward from there. Does that sound good? Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I think we're at time, right? A little past time. So in terms of the next meeting, we have August 1st. We could determine at that point when our next cohort meeting is, or we could do it over email? What would you prefer?
I think I'd like to see what if we can sort of put some stuff on the Jamboard and see where we think we need to be. Do we need another meeting before the August 1 cohort meeting, or do we think that we can, based on what we have on the Jamboard, we have a good idea and we can sort of communicate through email on that to move forward with at the next meeting?
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. So how about we just give ourselves a deadline by which to fill out that Jamboard? What would work for you all?
Yeah, that sounds good.
I don't know, we have the meeting on the 1st. What about, I mean, and again, I know folks are pretty slammed. What about next Friday, the 28th? And that'll give folks time to be able to see everything for August 1. Does that seem like a reasonable timeline?
Yeah, and I think that what I would say is that I think maybe during that time, maybe just communicate by email about whether or not we think that maybe, or maybe give it the deadline of next Wednesday. I know it's only a week, and say, oh, I need more time. Given that way, we have a couple more days, and if we need to sort of get together next week to discuss in, over Zoom or whatever, we can do that, or even just going back and forth with email.
I think a week is reasonable. I'm fine with, yeah,
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Because I think, as Nazneen said, like if we want to meet beforehand, before the August 1st meeting, we'll have time to do that. And then I see Selena's question of like, yeah, we need to identify chairs and roles still too.
Yeah, I talked to Bianca. She said we had till the end of that August 1st meeting. Okay, great. So we'll do that. We'll be in touch, and at least by next Friday.
Oh, wait, is it Friday or Wednesday?
I think I said I suggested Wednesday.
Oh, Wednesday. Sorry.
Yeah, that's because it just gives us a couple days to look at everything and say, hey, and one of us or two of it or whatever say, hey, I think we should meet if we can, or these are the questions I have over email, and with regard to that.
Yeah, so that's Wednesday, the 26th. And I guess by email in the next couple of days, we can, based on our brainstorming, we can have an assessment as to whether we need to have a meeting prior.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Sounds good.
All right. Well,
Thanks,
I think
everyone.
we were on a good start here. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All
Bye.
right.
Yeah, thanks,
Bye.
everybody. And I also want to thank the staff for joining
Yes.
us late in the day.
Yeah. And we went a little bit over. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Karen,
Karen, for
Corinne,
visiting
Carmen.
us.
Bye, Karen. Thank you
All
all.
right, bye.